Okay, good morning everyone. This is Servium calling. Welcome to the next in our series of INOOT webinars. My name is Steve Dawes. I'm the Service Director and I'm your host today. So hopefully everyone who's registered early have got their crunchies. So put your feet up, relax, grab a coffee. And for the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to be focusing on an area that's quite topical at the moment, cybersecurity, particularly from an end user point of view, probably the biggest risk to any business, I think it's fair to say. So I'm kindly joined by Sam Oliver from CybSafe. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning, Steve. Good morning, everyone.
Thanks for joining, Sam. So as I said, today we're focusing very much around the sort of risk around human cyber behavior. So for the benefit of everyone, we'll be taking questions and answers at the end. So there's an opportunity to, if there's anything specifically you'd like to find out, and also we talk a little bit about a trial that we'll be offering with CybSafe as well. But the purpose of our INOOT webinars is really to talk about some groundbreaking technology, what's happening in the marketplace, and we feel security really is a big area, a big topic that everyone's talking about. So, but let's look at the 22nd of November. What's it all about? Well, apart from Black Friday, let's see what happened on this day. 1958, Jamie Lee Curtis, the American actress from Halloween, True Lies, was born in Los Angeles. In 1963, President Kennedy was shot dead in Dallas, Texas. 1990, Margaret Thatcher stood down as Prime Minister after a cabinet refused to back her for a second round of leadership elections. 1995, a life sentence was given to Rosemary West, Britain's most prolific female serial killer. 2003, England rugby team won the World Cup, beating Australia 2017. It's quite a nail-biting final in Sydney, that. And in 2005, Angela Merkel, the leader of the Christian Democrats, was sworn as Germany's first woman chancellor. So that's the 22nd of November. More importantly to us, it's all about INOOT. So let me just give a little bit of background on Servium and just set the scene for today. And really the purpose of these webinars, like I say, is to help you as our customers, bring you new information, help you make informed decisions. But the key thing is putting you at the center of everything we do, what you do. And we create a lot of value through our account management team. We walk in your shoes, understand what your challenges are, and basically underpin that with our comprehensive ecosystem. But our approach is very much whatever your challenge, complete life cycle of services. So from strategy, design, implementation, support, and I think the key thing for us is the review at the end of any particular project. Let's understand that we've delivered on time, on budget, with expectations. And we do that via our service ecosystem with partners like CybSafe today. You know, we've got a great breadth and depth of partners that you as our customers have access to. And it's scalable from whatever the engagement is. But I think the key thing for me as the service director is that we're very transparent on who we use, who we partner with, and why we're using them. So bringing the right subject matter expertise to the table to help you with whatever the business challenge is. And there's a lot we can offer around services. So I encourage you to go and view one of our previous INOOT webinars that's on our YouTube channel. But there's a lot we can offer you as our customers. And looking at our Servium Pathfinder, where does today's webinar fit? It's really around security. Like I said, it's a big topic at the moment. We've done a number of webinars around security because we believe it's a major interest to our customers, and we need to be sort of adopting a more secure approach. And today, Sam's kindly going to talk about this, and I think the psychology, really, Sam, isn't it? Today is the sort of underpinning what you're going to talk about.
Yeah, exactly that. And thank you very much for the introduction, Steve. Obviously, really nice to be here and to be able to speak to all of you in attendance. So, yeah, behaviour is something that's quite often kind of overlooked, I think, when it comes to the human aspect of cybersecurity. So today's talk is really going to be examining just an example of a few of the behaviors that can be influenced and manipulated by would-be attackers through things like social engineering, and also how those can be applied to basically reinforce an individual to be more resilient against those kinds of influence techniques. Obviously, welcome everyone, and yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here, as I say. So I suppose to start off, it's really kind of important for us to identify that it's a really unfortunate fact, evident to those who are working in security and those who aren't necessarily more specifically focused on that particular area, that security awareness training in isolation and in its current form just really isn't having the desired effect. And it tends not to work because there's little or no effort to change people's behavior as a result of going through that process. We've basically taken the view that in order to reduce human cyber risk effectively, we really need to be focusing as an industry on not just security awareness training, but go far beyond just the point of raising awareness and actually influencing and changing behavior, and simultaneously, where possible, building a culture of cybersecurity within the organization as well. So we colloquially refer to that as the ABC approach: awareness, behavior, and culture. So in this talk, I'm basically going to be covering off, why that ABC approach is so essential to, an effective security strategy, full stop, let alone a security awareness strategy, and obviously focusing on specifically the cultural components and the ways that can actually influence how successful that campaign can be. Now, without dwelling too much on the problem, because I'm sure it's a truth self-evident that most of you have come across or empathise with quite a bit of the challenges that exist in this space. But fundamentally, the thing that has changed the most in terms of people's focus on this area is the fact that attackers' techniques are changing, and they're changing quite rapidly. So in 2018, there was a 23% increase in attackers trying to influence people as their primary sort of jumping off point for trying to compromise networks and organizations. And that is a spike of a quarter alongside other sort of more traditional attack vectors, which were either stagnating or in decline year on year from the previous view. And of course, there's that oft mentioned statistic that 9 in every 10 cyber attacks is actually caused by some form of human intervention or human error. So, of course, the issue itself is not sort of lost on anyone in attendance, I'm sure, but the idea of how we address that is very much grounded in traditional security awareness approaches, which mainly focus on training and phishing simulation tools. But neither of those things really impact behavior. They simply tell you what you already know. As a result of relying on quite shallow activities like that, you also then are presented with very shallow metrics and data against which you can use that information to make decisions about what you should do next in order to influence behavior and culture and so on. And so ultimately, there's a lack of data, and indeed, there's no real easy access to advice or guidance from people who do this work full time, I suppose, to support anything from an activity basis that you might actually be looking to address. And of course, what that leads to is the fact that issues prevail in an organization where cybersecurity really kind of remains quite ambiguous and uncertain in terms of what's working, what's not. It means that your cyber risk remains unnecessarily high. And for a lot of you, it involves spending a lot of time and resource actually trying to address the issue as impactfully as you can. But if you simply don't have the tools available to address it as effectively as you know you probably should, it means that you're basically fighting a losing battle. And the knock-on effect of that is there's a lack of value recognition for those kind of awareness activities. You really struggle for ideas and impact, and ultimately you have a lack of visibility in terms of the effectiveness and the usefulness of what's being conducted. So of course, the conventional wisdom obviously focuses on things like training and awareness. This is an excerpt from ISO 27001 and the NIS directive, the NIST framework. And both of those basically almost explicitly refer to training and awareness as a way of educating employees about what the risks are. But that definition is, I suppose, fundamentally flawed because it doesn't really reference anything in terms of ensuring that people act differently as a result of that security knowledge being obtained. And so it assumes that increasing people's security awareness of what the risks are automatically changes that behavior. And often that isn't the case. I mean, we all in attendance know that we should probably live with our belts as tight as possible so that we can build as big a pension as we can for when we don't take an income. But that doesn't stop us from splurging every now and then on a holiday or a luxury item that we've had our eye on for a while. And so it's this idea that awareness guaranteeing action is a dangerous assumption that has basically left a lot of organizations in the issue that they find themselves in today. So you consider passwords as an example. Most people know today in 2019 what makes for a secure password, but a couple of years ago that simply wasn't the case. The result of that is not awareness training, and it's not awareness of what the risk is, but it's the influencing of behavior and the forcing of behavior to move towards that more secure activity for individuals within organizations. So again, that traditional approach is quite dangerously led us to assume that users are interested in cybersecurity, and we've assumed they want to learn. Of course, the reality in most cases for the average end user is quite different. They think it's someone else's responsibility entirely. From a behavior perspective, we tend to try to alter what we as security professionals consider to be wrong behavior, rather than fundamentally understanding why users are behaving the way they do in the first place. And perhaps most dangerous of all is that we treat users as rational beings. We like to think of them as just another endpoint. But of course, there's any number of psychological and behavioral factors that can influence how someone responds when presented with a particular cybersecurity threat. So awareness is necessary, but it's actually not sufficient. The traditional focus of educating people basically makes that assumption that awareness equals a change in behavior. But of course, all of the context that applies to people's behavior in all other walks of life, the context that influences, yes, I know this, therefore I behave in this way, the mental, social, physical, and situational context is basically something that's completely overlooked in relation to security awareness activity. And of course, by that result, it means that it's mostly assumed that focusing solely on increasing people's security awareness is all that you are able to do, or all that you should be doing. But of course, doing that makes life incredibly easy for cyber criminals and would-be attackers to your organization. So we're really focusing about knowing your ABCs, and that's fundamentally what a person knows, what a person does, and the person's environment, and how all of those contribute and feed off one another to present I suppose, an element of human cyber resilience for the individuals in your organization. And we're not just talking about your organizational human cyber resilience, we're talking about individuals, their perception of the world, their attitudes, their behaviors, their sentiments, and indeed their knowledge and confidence in different areas surrounding cybersecurity topics. And so that focus on people means that we're instead able to focus on the way they behave, what they really think about cybersecurity and how that might influence their behavior, and indeed the things that exist in their environment that might prevent them from behaving as securely as they should be. So behavioral science, as I'm sure you can appreciate, is critical to understanding that particular component around what motivates people's behaviors and how you can fundamentally understand it. So as I've mentioned, awareness on its own simply fails to trigger secure behaviors. And so psychology and behavioral science is a critical component because primarily it can tell us what works in changing behavior and why. And then we can use that and apply that to the process of educating people so that we can actually join up those processes together. And that also helps individual end users translate that awareness into action when it comes to their cybersecurity and indeed technological interaction. And just a sort of a quick 101 on that rationality piece. Some of you might be familiar with this, some of you might not be. But essentially, there are two types of thinking in humans, generally speaking. There's system one thinking and system two thinking. System one tends to comprise about 95% of the decisions that we make, and it's what we would typically describe as our intuition, our gut feeling, our instincts. And those decisions we make using system one are fast, they're unconscious, and they're automatic, and they're everyday decisions. But of course, what that means is that they're far more likely to be laden with errors than system two thinking, which by comparison is more rational thinking. It's slow, it's effortful, it's considered, and ultimately those decisions can be more reliable. However, we simply as a species do not have the cognitive capacity to run 100% of the time in system two thinking. So things like the decisions we make about what I'm going to wear to work, or the route I'm going to take to the office today, whether or not you're going to go to a certain meeting at a certain time in a certain way. Those are all system one elements of thinking, because we simply cannot make those decisions in more effortful and more sort of focused manner, because quite simplistically, they are straightforward decisions to make, and therefore we don't need to apply that cognitive load. And of course, what that means in the context of cybersecurity awareness is that our cognitive biases are the things that influence system one. It's what makes system one thinking so easy for us to do without that cognitive load. And it's essentially over billions of years of human evolution, there are essentially just shy of 300 psychological biases that can be influenced when it comes to repeat behaviors. And think about that in the context of security awareness. If they can be influenced by attackers, they can obviously be influenced by those who are trying to protect individuals as well. Just as an example of what I mean by cognitive bias, just in case it's still a little bit fuzzy. There are two examples here. The police officers, of course, represent a position of authority. Authority, generally speaking, is something that's drilled into us from a very, very early age. So from when you are first kind of aware of your family unit, you're told to obey your parents. When you go to school, you're told to obey your teachers. In your adult life, you're told to obey police officers in the public domain, your boss in the workplace, for example. And eventually, when you retire, you end up obeying the orders of your spouse. But that is what we call the authority bias. We're more likely as human beings to place a greater weight to the inputs and the decisions and the requests of people in a position of comparative authority to ourselves than we are to people who are on the same level or someone who's lesser to ourselves in sort of any sort of context. So that's what we call the authority bias. And we see that prevalent in things like business email compromise, CEO fraud, for example, people impersonating someone senior in an organization in an effort to get people to feel as though if they don't comply, they might actually get in trouble. And that's obviously an incredibly effective tool that attackers are using in this day and age. But similarly, you're probably wondering what a shark and a vending machine has got to do with anything. You can probably more easily associate with the idea of death by shark attack than death by vending machine. And despite that fact, it's statistically more likely, about 6 times more likely at least, that you will meet your demise by being crushed by a vending machine than you are as meeting your demise in a shark attack. And the reason that that is the thing that comes to mind for most of you is because of what we describe as the availability bias. So how easily mental images come to mind, and how easily you can justify your thought processes and your decision making based on the information you have available to you. So there are no movies about killer vending machines. However, there are multiple movies about shark attacks and people being sort of meeting their ends rather grisly through shark attacks. But that's just an example of how cyber criminals can socially engineer people, because if you can use that as an attacker, then essentially those biases exist regardless of the context. So it's about applying those elements of behavioral science and psychology to how you engage and educate people about cybersecurity. And of course, that's what influences people's behavior in a longer term as well. But also our environment affects security as well. Ultimately, our physical and social environments are the two most important when it comes to the context of what we try and educate people about risks, and indeed how we hope they behave when presented with those risks. But you should really always be looking to design for the existing behavior in a secure manner. Now, what I mean by that is you use the example, as you can see here, of a local green space. I'm sure the designers thought this was absolutely brilliant to have a path at a right angle. But of course, if you are going over to the left, you are obviously going to cut that corner, because it means that from a convenience perspective, it gets you to where you're trying to go faster. And of course, from a design perspective, even though the best of intentions were there for the design, essentially the design was taken into account without consulting the people who are ultimately going to be the end users of that. And quite often policies and everything else like that around security are designed and created in isolation of understanding what user requirements actually are and what will allow them to remain productive whilst remaining secure. But security is also a social beast. We feed off the observed behaviors of others, and in terms of what we consider to be acceptable behavior is quite often influenced by what we most typically and commonly see in a particular context. So that's what we really refer to as the cultural iceberg, and the iceberg that sinks cybersecurity for most organizations. The way you tend to say you get things done in relation to cybersecurity is, of course, important. The visions, the goals, the mission, the values and everything else like that. But ultimately, the way things actually get done is quite often the invisible and unobservable behaviors in the traditional security awareness environment. So things like beliefs, perceptions, values, unwritten rules, norms, tradition, and so on. So those observable behaviors are actually quite often superficial. And the shared assumptions and everything below that waterline usually makes up about 90% of a company's actual culture. So the difference between how you say you get things done and the way you really get things done is you're really only measuring the top half of that iceberg, when there's so much more that could be addressed when it comes to cybersecurity culture. And of course, a people-centric culture is incredibly important. No organization, regardless of their size, can argue with the fact that they are at their most sort of powerful and their most collaborative when they're actually relying on their people being an active input into a variety of ways that they run their organization, and security should really be no different. So it's about beginning to understand the way people behave, how they think about cybersecurity, and indeed the things that you can do to either prevent or encourage certain behaviors, which is typically shaped through that physical and social environment, as we've just covered. So as an example, you look at something like trust. If employees have to follow processes, they need to have faith that those processes are well designed, and they need to have faith and trust in those individuals who put them in place. So if there's a feeling of unease or mistrust towards either of those things, then it's most likely that undesirable behaviors will be presented in that sort of environment. Consider something like resource and communication as well. So a perception of the quality and quantity of support and assistance that they get, not just training, but also on the spot cyber assistance. If they have a question, if they have a query, can they go to people? Are there clearly communicated policies about what to do in the event of a breach? Are they presented with up-to-date cybersecurity news and information? Do they have access to support? How autonomous are they in their choice of how they practice security? All of the things like that are obviously crucially important. Responsibility, similarly, is the way that employees tend to view their organizational security. So do they consider it an individual responsibility of their own as part of a larger group, or do they feel as though it should be pushed out entirely to another group like the IT security team or whatever else? Ultimately, for security to be able to prevent cyber threats, as we all know, there needs to be this collaborative effort from all employees, regardless of their status and regardless of their role. Looking at productive security, it's basically things like the perceived impact that security policies actually have on an ability for an employee to do their job. So if you create a policy which is designed to be super secure, but it prevents that individual from being productive, they're always going to find a way to work around that. And so those policies that are designed with productivity, research has shown, as well as whatever they are mandating in terms of that sort of thing, that people are more likely to comply with them, because it doesn't obstruct their productivity. Ultimately, we're very feral beings, and we have a preference to do the work and do the job that we are employed to do, the thing that puts food on the table. So ensuring that we're able to practice security productively is of vital importance. Community, of course, in any other aspect of organizational culture, not just security culture. So it's that security related behavioral acceptance, whether or not they'll be ridiculed for being sort of extra cautious about an email that they weren't expecting, or if they are pressured or coerced by a line manager to sacrifice security in order to remain productive. It's basically a critically important aspect that most organizations just assume is already in place, but don't really have a way of measuring. And then looking at things like ease and choice. How comfortable do employees feel when they're engaging and interacting with cybersecurity? Are they confident? Are they uncertain about certain topics and more confident in others? Are they tentative in other ones as well? It's also related to a person's behavioral control, meaning whether or not they feel that they're at ease or if they're at odds when performing a particular security behavior. A lot of research has indicated that if someone feels at ease when performing a task, they will be more likely to continue doing it. And of course, by comparison, if they feel like they're at odds with it, they're more likely to stop. And then, of course, you look at things like justness and fairness. So typically employees will have quite a dim view about whether or not they will be treated fairly in the event that they are found to be the source of a cybersecurity incident. And whether or not they feel fairly treated or unjustly punished in those environments is a really important part of how you design for that security culture, which is transparent, which is blame-free, and indeed that creates an environment where employees feel comfortable speaking up when things go wrong, knowing that they won't be reprimanded for being the one to disclose it or even being the one to have caused it. So just looking at those 7 examples of cultural components, I mean, how many of these cultural dimensions, if any, can you actually measure through the traditional approaches that I'm sure a lot of organizations are taking, and some of you on the call might be taking, which is to focus on training and awareness activity and phishing simulations? The answer is very, very little data that can actually inform any real information that you're able to act upon and use as sort of a metric for improvement and effectiveness of the program that you're running. Obviously, one component of what the CybSafe platform actually does is that cultural assessment tool. CCAT, as we call it, the CybSafe cultural assessment tool, is basically a tool that facilitates the measurement and development of that people-centric security culture through a combination of a diagnostic survey and indeed a data analysis engine as well. And what we've done is we've intensely researched and tested this in client environments to the point where the outputs from this particular cultural sort of diagnostic activity presents back to you as a group of administrators insights and advice which is designed to not only improve that people-centric security culture, but also to predict future cybersecurity behaviors. So identifying across individuals, across groups, and across the organization as a whole, it helps you to identify those strengths and weaknesses across those 7 different cultural dimensions that we've just looked at, which are successfully proven to influence and improve security behavior as a result. And of course, what we cover and what we assess as part of that cultural component is very much linked to the opportunity, the environment in which people are presented to practice good security. But of course, what really goes into behavior as well is people's capabilities, so their physical and psychological abilities and their awareness, and of course their motivation for behaving in a certain way, the conscious and unconscious decision making that they have. And all 3 of these things are factored in very, very specifically to how we influence behavior through the CybSafe platform. So our solution basically helps organizations move away from that focus of training and educating towards supporting and assisting end users. And what we mean by that is that the tools available to end users include an enterprise mobile app for pocket guidance for what do I do if scenarios and interactive to-do lists for cybersecurity behaviors, that cultural assessment, of course, behavioral nudges, the ability to share security advice with friends and family through the platform, of course, presenting them with learning and engagement tools, and personalizing the content using machine learning based on not just the individual's role, but how their perception and their confidence and their knowledge levels in different risk areas evolves over time. So instead of giving everyone the same approach and the same one-size-fits-all, is very much addressed through the platform that learns how people learn and presents the information in the most effective way back to them. And of course, underpinning that are simulated social engineering attacks, including email phishing, but also looking at USB baiting, and in the near future, looking at things like phishing, public Wi-Fi, rogue Wi-Fi pop-ups, and a few other attack vectors to measure against as well. And CybSafe is a solution for you guys as sort of security practitioners and IT managers and whatever role you happen to hold within your organization. CybSafe, in a nutshell, has been created specifically to be a single viewpoint and a method by which you can get better metrics and data using an advanced analytics engine around all of these topics that we've covered around awareness, behavior, and culture. So we conduct analytics on those. We present those back in easily digestible formats so that senior leadership can also digest and understand where risk is being carried and what can be done to reduce it, and the impact of the activities that you're actually having through delivering the security awareness campaign that you are. So it's an intelligent software platform which is basically designed to give you total visibility of the human cyber risk factors within your organization. And most recently, we've even published reports on things like advocacy, proactivity, behavior change, and learning activity to help you understand that going far, far deeper than just course completion rates and phishing click rates about what you can do to support and influence your people. And that's pretty much everything I wanted to sort of introduce to you all this morning. I'm hoping it wasn't too much of a psychology 101, but I think it's always quite interesting to delve into our tiny little minds a little bit better.
I think it's good to get that background, Sam, and from a psychology point of view, understanding what behaviours influence people when it comes to cyber security. I think that's one of the key things for me on this. I think also the fact that this sort of as a managed service is delivered from the UK. I know when we've looked at other people in the marketplace and what we feel is going to be best for our customers, there are solutions that are American based and so on. But I think the fact that the platform is based in the UK is I think really important from the point of view not just security but data sovereignty and so on and so forth. So I think again that's an important message for me as well. And I think I'll avoid vending machines in the future, but there you go. So okay, well that's great, Sam. Thanks very much for that. That's really been sort of very informative and some really good background on why CybSafe have developed this platform. So I'll open the floor now to everyone for questions. There's a Q&A button that is available at the bottom of your screen. You can ask questions anonymously, so don't be shy, and Sam will answer those. Also, we as part of this process, we're offering a free of charge trial for CybSafe. I think it's a 7-day trial, isn't it, Sam? For
yes, yeah.
Interested. So when I launch the poll right at the end, if you are interested in that doing that trial, then please just highlight that there as well. So questions, Sam, for you. One from Jim on sort of timescales and how long does it take an individual to complete sort of the training and go through the process?
Very good question. So obviously one component of the user tools is the education and awareness modules. Each module is designed to take no more than about 7 to 9 minutes to complete, and there's 10 core modules which result in them receiving a GCHQ accredited certificate. So if you want to sit down and do it all in one stab, which obviously we don't necessarily recommend, you'd be looking at probably about probably an hour and a half in total for the education activity. But of course, there's ongoing support and assistance tools that they can access at their leisure. Yeah,
because training is only one part of it.
Correct.
And I think for me, the fact that they are British videos as well, not American. So no offence to our friends over the water. So the question from Helena, I think you might have related to this a little bit before, but how regularly is the platform updated? And obviously, as part of the licensing and the sort of the managed service model, how regularly do you issue updates, Sam?
Very good question. Thank you for that, Helen. And the answer is very simple. So the content is reviewed and updated at a maximum interval of every 60 days, because of course it's useless to have a security awareness training that's out of date with the threat landscape, or out of step with the threat landscape. In terms of the platform itself, we are running on a continuous improvement schedule. So we tend to be releasing new features, new reports, and new sort of back-end capabilities for our ability to measure different behavioral data points at a speed of probably 3 or 4 every fortnight. So we are rapidly expanding and improving the capabilities of the platform from a technical perspective as well.
Okay, that's good to hear. Question from Ian in relation to simulated attacks. How easy is it for my business to trigger simulated attacks, and can you target specific groups?
Very good question. So we don't currently allow for the targeting of specific groups through the platform, but in terms of the configuration of running these campaigns, essentially it's as straightforward as configuring the intensity of simulations that are presented to people. Our phishing capability is more grounded in that behavioral science element, so we're able to measure the reasons why a particular simulation was successful, based on the emotions that were invoked, based on the influence techniques that were used, and based on the category of content that was included in it, so that instead of just getting click rates and report rates, you actually can get a better understanding of the reasons why different groups and different individuals are more susceptible than others to different types of phishing. So instead of giving everyone a phishing 101 communication, you can give people in HR a very different phishing message to those in finance if you know that they're influenced in different ways or they are vulnerable in different ways. So the configuration of that is something that we run automatically in terms of what the users see and how often, sort of how we measure that. But essentially the configuration is phishing is either on or off for your user base, and then you simply configure the intensity of how many emails they receive in a 2-week period.
Okay, so question from Alice in relation to deployment of CybSafe. So how easy is it to deploy? What about training, and so what sort of hand-holding is done as part of the deployment, Sam?
Very good question. So because we are a pure SaaS solution, it is literally as straightforward as once an order has been placed, we'll create the account and we'll send an invite email to the primary admin. From that point, we'll have a very short onboarding call just to get you situated and show you around the platform. But we have a fully dedicated and the most resourced team in CybSafe as an organization is our customer success team. So they, as a team, will be there on hand to run you through not just that onboarding, but any other questions that you might have. Typically, we see from the initial onboarding call to a full rollout, we're down to about 6 or 7 working days to having this in the hands of all end users across a variety of company sizes that range from, you know, a few hundred all the way up to many tens of thousands. So it's nice and easy to deploy. Yeah.
So and that customer success team is London based, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah. We're all based here.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. From a question in relation to from Frank in relation to the data that's collected in the dashboard, sort of how is that backed up for historic purposes?
Sure. So we obviously capture that behavioral data from any and all ongoing activity for end users interacting with the platform. The platform itself is run on an AWS instance, which is currently based in Dublin, but we're also going to be replicating that into the UK as well. But ultimately, yeah, we're backing up that data for the purposes if whatever instance might cause our AWS instance to fail and access to be lost, there would be a complete backup of data in that environment. But critically across things like GDPR is that if you are looking to remove a user or someone has left your organization, you can obviously delete that user's personal information, but still retain that anonymized behavioral data. So even removing users from the platform doesn't influence the data set when looking back in time, for example.
Okay, good. I think this might be the final question from Sarah in relation to the cost model around this. So my understanding, it's a per user model. So do you want to explain a little bit about how the metrics of the cost model works, Sam?
Of course, yeah. So exactly right, because we're a SaaS platform, we license on a per user per annum basis. We have 3 different service levels and then 3 different managed service add-on costs to that as well, if you'd like it to be run as a managed service by CybSafe. So we have Essentials, which is one of either the learning and education modules or the phishing simulations or the cultural assessment, which can be purchased in isolation. And then from there, you move on to Pro, which is a combination of everything, and pretty much most of the stuff that I've spoken about today. And then into the enterprise space, you're looking at things like user provisioning and single sign-on integration for that ease of an enterprise deployment, basically. And then through the managed services, you then get things like, do we actually manage and administer the platform for you all the way through to publishing quarterly reports about your performance and your improvements and your executive briefs and all of that kind of thing. So it really does range for whatever the end goal or the objective is for any organization. We can pretty much facilitate that out of the box with our license model.
Yeah, it's good that it's a flexible licensing model. It's simple to understand, you know, on a per user basis, and there's different options as well. So it's not a one size fits all, is it? Which is good.
Correct. Yeah, exactly that.
Okay, that's great. Well, I think that's the questions, Sam. So thanks for letting us put you on the spot a little bit there.
No worries.
Just while I'm summarising, I'm just going to launch the poll now. So again, we deliver these polls every time we run the webinars, really to get feedback from you. So we do value that. But also within the poll, you can highlight if you would be interested in the free of charge trial that we're offering in partnership with CybSafe. So if you wouldn't mind completing that now, and again, if you want the trial, just drop that into the poll. If you do have any further questions, by all means, get in touch. Drop me an email or via your account manager, and we'll answer those for you. I know it's difficult today, Sam, to go into too much detail. It's just trying to give people a sort of a snapshot and a feel for what it's all about. So
sure,
we do have limited time. So if there's any more information you need, then please drop the questions into either myself or your account manager. So we will be publishing a recording of this later today. So there'll be a follow-up email that comes out with a link to the recording. And in about 10 days' time, we will publish this onto our YouTube channel. So the content there will be available to share with your colleagues in the future. And there are other webinars on the YouTube channel. So again, I encourage you to subscribe to that. So if you wouldn't mind completing the poll, that'd be great. Sam, thank you very much for taking the time. That's been a great insight. Hopefully everyone's found that view. So thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you, Steve, for having me, and thank you everyone for listening in.
That's good. So the next in our INOOT series, which is actually the last in season 2, which is on Friday, the 6th of December, 10 o'clock. We're doing some work with Dell EMC around the Unity XT unified storage platform, which is really a sort of mid-range platform that's there to deliver sort of storage speed efficiency in the multi-cloud world. So that is our next INOOT webinar, Friday the 6th. You can register via our INOOT hub for that. As I say, that's the last in season 2. So I think for me, that's it for today. I trust everyone's found that of interest. Thank you for taking the time, and enjoy the rest of your Friday, everyone. Thank you.